Are you a member of Club Comics? Probably not. If you're listening to this video. Hey, this is Neon, and I'm here again with Geeky Sparkles.
Hello.
And we're going to talk a little bit about the comic book industry. We have a little bit of insight into this as we've worked in comics professionally for years.
Yes.
And we have been in Club Comics before.
Kind of.
And and we are, I think, officially out of Club Comics.
I have no idea. I don't
now.
I can't even keep up.
No idea. But really what has prompted this video is all of this talk about Comicsgate, like there being a concerted effort for the comic book publishers and the comic book media to keep conservatives and people they just don't like out of the comic book industry, hence the club mentality. And we're going to talk a little bit about that and how it relates to a recent crowdfunding campaign for a comic called Jawbreakers by Richard Meyer, who runs the Diversity in Comics YouTube channel. Mm-hmm. And, really, it's just, I'm still saying here, like, the whole situation blows my mind. We've been watching it sort of like a slow motion train wreck for months, like right. All of this stuff building up. Really, there are a small group of YouTubers who have really been vocal about their dislike of the current direction of the comic book industry. And they've been very critical of the comic book industry. And I think a good chunk of the criticism is valid. I mean, right. The comic book industry is not in a very good place now. Well, pros and journalists and shop owners, they don't like that. They don't like that outside opinion. And it's really just sort of...
the opinion of the people who actually buy the books and spend their money and
right.
that pay them all?
Yeah, because up until recently, the comic book industry has been a very close-knit group of people. I mean, you basically...
It always has been.
It always has been, but they've also done a pretty good job of keeping outsiders out. And I think what has happened with crowdfunding and with social media is that anybody can basically break into comics.
Well,
now.
that, and I think webcomics kind of started that too. Where,
right.
Yeah, I mean,
well,
there's always been an outlier until recently, which is a whole other podcast we'll get into another day.
Yeah, and well, even webcomics people. We'll go back to talking about webcomics, but webcomics people for the longest time had to validate themselves with print comics people. They were, print comics people always look down their nose at webcomics people. Right. So yeah, there is a Club Comics as someone who's worked on Eisner-winning books.
And how did you get those gigs, Tom? To be fair,
I knew somebody.
That's exactly.
I knew somebody. I knew the right people, and I was the right person at the right time. And I happened to be there, and after this video, I don't think my phone's going to be ringing anymore, but that's okay, because comics doesn't pay very much anyway, and that's a whole nother video.
Yeah, that is.
So we're going to talk about the Jawbreakers campaign. Again, this is Richard Myers running this. He runs Diversity in Comics. Diversity in Comics is sort of the, unofficial leader of this. But he's the most well-known.
I think he's the most well-known
YouTuber right now when it comes to being critical of the comic book industry and what they feel. A group of people feel is the comic book industry is going too far left politically, and that the professionals are not behaving in a professional manner.
See, that's what gets me is the lack of professionalism.
Yeah.
That's what, I don't care what side you're on politically. It's professionalism that's I'm like, eh.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that. We'll talk about differences, the comic book industry now compared to, even when we started working in comics. But anyway, they've hated on this guy for months. I mean, I think his channel's been around a little over a year now. He's got almost 70,000 subscribers.
Yeah, but I think to be fair, I think it goes both ways on the hating thing.
Well, yeah,
I do. I really think there's
okay. So we'll talk about that. Diversity in Comics does a lot of roasting. I'll say that.
But he will say when something is good and it's
right.
deserved to get, accolades. He gives it to it. He
doesn't
just
absolutely.
Hate on it to hate on it.
He is a fan.
We'll give him that.
He's a fan first and foremost, and yeah, he will call it out when he doesn't like it. Now the thing is, a lot of people do that on YouTube, but most of the people who do that sort of rant in their own little quiet corner. They don't have the audience that Diversity in Comics has cultivated. And because of that, there are all kinds of allegations about him, that he's like some alt-right Nazi, that he's, a hateful, mean, nasty person.
Speaking of alt-right Nazi, you got called.
I got called an alt-right, and this is
funny because we're moderate-leaning left.
I'm a left-leaning moderate. Like, it blows my mind. But the comic industry right now is so toxic that environment is so toxic right now that if you say anything critical of the comic book industry,
and all you did was post the Marvel sales numbers.
Yeah, I just said Marvel's not doing
these
so
numbers
hot.
are bad. Maybe we should worry about this.
Yeah, and I said,
that's all he did.
That's all I did.
He wasn't taking sides because we weren't going to at that point. We stayed out of it as much as possible.
I got roast all over. I mean, there were a lot more people agreed with me than didn't agree with me, but I had a lot of indie comic book types coming out and calling me, oh, he's just another alt-right Nazi. I'm like, dude, I am not even right. I'm like, not even. It's just because I'm saying something you don't agree with does not make me a Nazi, and it's really insulting to throw that term around given how serious
which is
actual
what other
Nazis
people
are.
have brought up before when they were called that.
It's disgusting to even throw that around. But okay, so going back, they've tried to shut down his channel. We've had some of the
a lot.
Yeah, they've had some of the actually some comics journalists from Bleeding Cool website. They've actually tried to, as I understand it, tried to get his channel shut down for harassment.
Wasn't there even a fake account that was in a fake journalist claiming
they created a fake journalist? I don't know if Bleeding Cool had anything to do with this.
I know somebody did.
There was a man who created a damsel in distress female reporter,
which is a female, pisses me off.
Who claimed to be the victim of harassment of diversity in comics. And then I guess this character that they created was their OC. Was his Melissa Morgue never existed. The whole thing is just insane. But the lengths that comic book people, I'm saying people, not professionals, because professionals would not actually behave this way, have gone to try to shut him down is just absolutely mind-blowing.
Well, it's because they're scared.
They're scared. And
I'm telling you.
To be completely honest, they should be scared, because what this movement represents is basically... It's almost like it feels like a lot of the customers are taking back the comic book industry. The comic book industry has gotten it's become very myopic. It's become sort of a mini Hollywood.
I think what the problem is not that there's people that are women doing comics, or that there's people of different genders, ethnicities, sexual orientations doing comics. That's not the problem. I don't think people care about that. What people care about is that when you have a book and you're liking this book, you followed this book for years, and all of a sudden the book is no longer the book. Now it's a platform for an agenda that isn't something that should be in the book.
Right.
That's when people get mad. Like it wasn't just the creator, it was these creators, but they were trying to push their own agenda in books that shouldn't have that agenda in them.
Right. I mean,
it fit. That's different.
Yeah. I mean, it used to be the comics. People read comics to escape politics, especially now with the political.
You can't escape. It's everywhere.
You can't.
I mean, read comics.
Yeah, and that's it. You can't even read comics to escape the politics, and then you can't even go out onto social media and follow comic book professionals, because you're constantly being hit in the face with politics. That's like all it is. And people I think are getting tired of it. That coupled with, and now I don't think that's the main reason why comic sales are down. I think there are a lot of other factors, but this definitely has helped speed the decline.
I don't think it's only this.
No, and
it doesn't help.
So anyway, it's kind of funny to watch this, because the more that they've tried to shut down diversity in comics, the more successful his channel has become.
That's not surprising. I mean, look at anything. The forbidden fruits that everybody's going to go for.
Yeah, don't talk to that guy.
In history, when they were telling you books were banned, what were the books that sold the most? I mean,
the banned books.
It's just, I mean, all it's doing is creating a larger platform. And for both sides, honestly.
Right.
But it's just creating a larger platform. So if you keep fighting, it just, it's almost like any publicity is good publicity, even if it's bad publicity.
And so what's going on now is, okay, so they tried to get his YouTube channel shut down. It exploded to
Twitter.
70,000 followers. They tried to get Twitter shut down. It actually blew up in the faces of some of the people who tried to get shut down, and they got shut down.
Right.
They tried to shut down his Patreon. He's got like over $1,000 a month on Patreon. Tried to basically bully him out of comics, because he had written some comics before. I guess he'd done some indie stuff, but he wanted to do more comics work, and they were like, well, we're never going to hire you. We'd never hire you.
And your talent's not good enough. Let your talent speak for itself. Right. So he did, and now they're mad about that too.
So $200 and some $1,000 later,
he wouldn't hire people who knew better than he did.
He did. He's working with John Malin, who is a fantastic Marvel artist. Ethan Van Sciver, who is controversial, but he's a well-respected DC Comics artist. He has a YouTube channel too. And basically it was like the perfect storm of people that some people in comics don't like, which is actually, I think, like you said, made the demand for the product even that much more. And some people I think are backing it just to stick it to the comic book industry.
If you read the comments, a lot of comments are, I only backed this because I wanted to give a middle finger to the comic book industry.
Yeah.
They'll flat out tell you that's why they backed it. So, I mean, I think a lot of it, they made their own enemy.
Yeah, you created your own enemy. You did. And it's sort of like you look at, the Batman comics. Batman's always accidentally making his own enemies. Not saying that these guys are the heroes, because everybody thinks they're the hero.
Well, that's it. Both sides think they're the hero and the other side's the villain. And both sides are pointing the finger and calling out harassment and everything else and saying, oh, you're harassing us, you're bullying us. But their behavior is exactly the same thing that they're being mad about from the other side.
Right.
It's like the same coin, different sides. I mean, it is.
Yeah, it's just insane, because now, they produced this, or they launched this Indiegogo campaign, $200,000+. They have a publisher lined up. It's Antarctic Press. Mm-hmm. Which has been around for ages. I mean, Antarctic Press has been around for a long time. Very well respected in indie circles. They've been around. But now retailers, some retail, not saying all retailers, some retailers they've organized, I guess, from what I can gather,
with the people that were the ones that were yelling and screaming the most.
A secret group talking about getting the book banned from comic shops.
And because apparently, if you didn't agree, they remove you from their group, and
which
I don't know. That's all hearsay.
I'm just like, here's the thing: the comic book industry right now is in the gutter, and you cannot afford to lose any customers. The $200,000+ Indiegogo campaign has like 4,000 or 5,000 people who are paying comic book customers, and you're basically telling them that, like, you don't want their business, and because this is going to get out that these shops are not
right.
The shops can't stay
in
business.
It already is out, apparently. Yeah. Apparently, the names got leaked, and now one of the big, big people involved in this is going around whining and screaming about how now we're going to get harassed. How dare you? Because we're going to get harassed. But I'm like, but you did something really shitty. You went and had a secret group with the sole intent of doing something very unethical and underhanded because you didn't like something. Now, my thing is, if you really truly believe that your stance is valid, that you are on the moral high ground and you are correct, you are not going to do little backdoor, hidden secret, this kind of crap. You're not going to behave that way. Well, now it's come out that they're doing this, and it was a really shitty thing to do. And as a result, they're going to be harassed for it, but they kind of deserve to be harassed for it because it was a crappy thing to do.
I think in this case, like I normally, there are claims of targeted harassment from Diversity in Comics and some other YouTubers.
I will say they do bait. I think
there's
because I've said to you, dude, honey, he's baiting people.
Yeah, I know.
But they bait him too. So
right.
Both
See,
sides.
that's where it gets tricky, because I've seen some behavior that I wouldn't condone on either side. But regardless of that, the comic book professionals are basically participating in the kind of behavior that they say that Diversity in Comics is participating in.
Right.
The thing is, they're the comic book professionals. Now, I'm not saying that you should just like turn the other cheek and get slapped around or whatever, but there was a time, and it wasn't too long ago, where comic book professionals were basically white-collar office professionals, and you were expected to behave as such. You couldn't go on Twitter and say, for example, anyone who voted for Donald Trump will remember who you are, and we will not let you work for Marvel Comics ever again. And there was a Marvel editor who said that. That would never fly.
No.
Because you're basically, in that case, you're speaking for the company just by your position.
And even now, I don't think you get fired. People are getting posted on social media for doing really crappy things like race baiting and things all the time, and they're instantly fired from their companies because they're like, we don't want to be associated with that. But somehow this keeps going on
because it's comics. I mean, the end of the day, this happens because we're expecting professionalism from an industry that gave up on being professional decades ago. Mm-hmm. Like the comic book industry I can't even remember the last time. There's a reason that even like Hollywood doesn't take they'll take your IP, but they don't even take the comic book industry seriously.
Well, like Marvel Cinematic Universe is completely different than Marvel Comics. They took all the good people from Marvel to the Cinematic Universe, right. And quite frankly, Disney would cut Marvel loose tomorrow if they thought they had to.
They absolutely would. Disney, just from my understanding,
we work with that stuff.
Yeah, Disney. From my understanding, Disney, like Marvel Comics, is a headache. It's a liability, and it just was part of the deal.
There's a reason why a lot of people suddenly quit for other jobs that were major steps down. There was a reason. I'll just say that. That's all I can say.
Yeah, I think Disney once they were made aware of the situation, probably took steps to remedy.
We're sure they were made aware of it.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, we're sure they were made aware of it. But
yes. So anyway, you know, it's appalling. This is where comics has fallen. And you know, the whole situation 10 years ago, this would not have been the case. Even if you had someone out there who was quote unquote, you know, picking fights with professionals or whatever, you know, you would not have the entire industry colluding with retailers and editors and you know, journalists to try to like
and saying if you don't do what we say, you're out of the group and all that. It's
right.
Just, it's crazy.
It goes beyond even that. Like Diversity in Comics is a more extreme case because of his platform, because you know some of the controversial things he says.
Yes, it is an extreme example. Yes,
but you don't have to be as extreme as Diversity in Comics to get hate from the comic book industry.
Yes, this is
from
true.
Club Comics. I'm not even going to call. You know what? I'm going to stop calling it an industry because I don't even think. I think it's a self-sustaining.
It's been a club for a while.
It's a club. It's a clique, and it has been. We know this because we've been in it for you know, well over a decade. We've seen how it works, and you know, it is what it is. But I mean, to expect professionalism from people who are in it basically just because they want to make a living, just drawing doodles of whatever. You know, and that's what a lot of them are. I mean, there are some true professionals in comics, but I hate to say it, but and not to make it an ageist thing, but it's the older generations.
And you know what the thing is too,
that
even the ones who might disagree and think that it's out of line aren't going to say anything because they're too afraid. If you go against it, you're in trouble. You're listed as the enemy because there is no gray area. It's black and white.
Yeah.
And it's funny because the one side is not so much so, but the other side is extreme. And it's like we're definitely in the middle, leaning left. You're definitely left-leaning moderates.
You're dancing around. I will come out and say it. Yeah, I identify myself as a left-leaning moderate, okay, politically. And I will come out and say that I think on the conservative side, they've been a lot more accommodating than the far left.
Right. Basically, they'll tell you, if you don't agree with everything we're saying, you're against us. And they've said the middle is just as bad as the right. And it's no, we're not. We're basically saying, hey, look, you know what? You're calling it extreme for a reason. So, you know.
And it has become very extreme. I think really with comics, I had this conversation with somebody a couple of weeks ago. We talked about comics, and you know, I can tie it into economics because I think basically what's going on is. The comic book industry, because of the state that's in, the sad state that's in right now, there are very few good paying gigs in comics. The people who are making good money, like Ethan Van Sciver, who's worked for DC for years, he's worked his way up. He's probably gets, you know, one of their top page rates, but he's had to work at it for years.
Right.
People just coming into comics right now, you can expect possibly even below minimum wage if you break it down by the hour for the page rates.
True.
And so the people that you're getting, because most people would be like, I am staying as far away from comics as possible. The people you're getting sometimes aren't really professionals because you get what you pay for. I'm not saying everybody's not a professional. I'm just saying,
well, some of them really are good.
Talent is still independent of professionalism because you don't have that, I guess, that office culture that I know like Marvel and DC had back in the 70s and 80s, where you were sort of working for a company, expected to behave yourself like you're working for a real company. And now it's just like, okay, I was out on Tumblr and they hired me, and oh my God, I can't believe I'm getting paid to draw pictures. You know,
it's not retail.
Iron Man. It's,
oh
not
gosh,
retail.
it's not retail.
Oh my God, that's like, yeah, it's like, oh my God.
That's a whole other podcast again, which
that's
it
a whole
will be
other,
coming.
There will be a lot of because we've been holding our tongues on the comic book
We were
thing.
trying to stay out of
neutral
it as much as
but
possible.
There is no, I don't think there's any
after things that have been said to us, it's like we can't stay neutral because even if we're trying to be fair onto both sides, we're going to be accused of being on the right side anyway, even if we're not. So
yeah, pretty much. When I did the articles about Marvel comic sales, and again, I tried to
not relate. We had no idea this was even going on.
No,
didn't even know.
I had no idea that there was a Comicsgate happening.
No,
this
we
was
had
like
no
last
idea.
summer, and I was just blogging. I was doing what I was supposed to do, looking into it, and I had several professionals, people I've actually worked with, people I knew in the comic book. Like I knew these people in real life.
Yeah, we knew them.
They unfollowed me on social media. Because I dared question
it used to be that if you would bring it up, you're being negative. That was before it got to this extreme it's at now. It was just you were labeled negative. Because people don't seem to understand there's a difference between honesty and negativity, which is a whole other podcast yet again.
Yeah.
But that was the worst you were was negative. But now it's not. Even if you're telling the truth, it's not just being negative. Now, well, you're just an alt-right Nazi. And then we were
My
like,
God,
wait, back up. What's going on?
Yeah,
we were like, where did this come from?
Yeah, and I had no idea. I was like, I mean, people were like taking my articles and they were posting them all over Facebook, and they're like, oh my God, it's another alt-right Nazi. I'm like, what?
Or I love
what?
the favorite. Why is a travel blogger writing about comics?
Oh my
when
God,
your bio says straight up, you work in comics.
Yeah, so here's the thing. So I do travel blogging. I do talk mostly about, theme parks, Disney theme parks. Because I do have a connection with Disney. I worked on Disney Comics for years.
Mm-hmm.
Disney Comics are not easy to work on.
I will say Disney Comics is one of the most backstabbing.
That's a whole nother issue. There's a reason I don't work by choice. I don't work on Disney Comics anymore because they're not actually produced by the Walt Disney Company. The licensees, it's a lot of politics. It's a whole nother issue.
A whole other thing of politics.
Anyway, the point being is, I was writing about Marvel Comics because I knew about Disney. I know about how the Walt Disney Company operates, and I, also had experience working with comics. So we had a lot of these indie comics people like, hey, who's this guy? What's he do? How does he know anything about comic books? He just writes travel blogs. And it's like, nah, because I've been working in comics for like 15 years, and I wanted to work in comics for like 15 years before that. So, we've been around. We've been to conventions. We go to conventions all the time. We know.
Now you told me you're old.
Well, no, I haven't.
They don't know how old I am, but they know you're old.
Yeah, I'm
Way
old.
to go.
I'm over 30. So, it's a really comics. It breaks my heart because I loved past tense the comic book industry. Ever since we've been married, it was a huge part of our life.
When I met him, that's all he wanted to do.
Draw comics. And this was back, again, not to date me, back in the 90s, trying to break into comics. And Geeky Sparkles and I, we've spent a lot of our life going to comic book conventions, talking to comic book people, being part of that club.
Which we love. I mean, we do.
Which
I love
we
it.
do.
Well, I love it anyway.
And it feels like now I don't recognize this industry anymore. I don't recognize it.
No, I'm 100% in agreement and for diversity being letting some different people, different kinds of people come in and have a chance to draw and stuff.
Absolutely.
100% agree with that. I do agree that women are sometimes portrayed in comics in a way that they shouldn't be portrayed as all the time. I'm glad that Jawbreakers got the money they got. The one character dressed in a loincloth with her breast barely covered. Besides the fact that if you have big boobs, when you try to fight like that, all you're going to do is hurt yourself.
You slap yourself.
And I know this because I have big boobs. But not that I'm saying that for any reason other than to get my point across. But they do kind of treat women like, they do. I'm just gonna say they treat them like they do.
Yeah, I know, but
I agree with the movement to go away from that.
Yeah,
but I think you can replace it with more toxic things, which is what happened.
Right, and I mean, to me, from what I've seen of it, it looks like a throwback to '90s comics, which I think a lot of fans really want because that was I think the end of comics just being a purely entertainment. Now then became got very kind of weirdly political and.
Well, I don't understand why they keep saying that women weren't portrayed as leaders and things in comics back then because they were.
Freaking Storm and the X-Men. She led the X-Men for years.
They keep saying that, and I'm like, but then again, some of the people that I will say, if you're gonna hire somebody to do comics, you should probably make sure they actually read comics.
Yeah.
And they actually know comics.
Oh my God! Thank you for saying that.
People that are being hired were bragging that they didn't know anything about comics, and now they were in charge of comics. I'm just like, it's kind of like the Star Wars movies. I'm gonna go there. A lot of people involved with the Star Wars movies that are doing poorly have admitted they did not watch Star Wars.
They were not huge fans.
They were not fans. They just recently have become people who watch Star Wars. They never watched it. And they're the ones deciding the fate of Star Wars. I'm like, if you're going to have somebody decide the fate of a fandom or an IP or a story, you need to have somebody who knows that particular IP, fandom, or story. I'm just saying.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I think again, though, that comes down to money because what they're doing is they're hiring these kids. And I'm going to say kids because I'm old, because I'm over 30.
There are a lot of women out there who are really good who know comics.
There were, okay, now this
I know some.
We could go.
I'm just saying.
We could go into this too because there were some groundbreaking professional women in comics 20, 30, 40 years ago who I swear to God the comic creators today forget about Jeanette Kahn at DC. They forget about all of these people who worked in comics before. Now there weren't a ton of women working in comics because just comics were kind of became a dude thing, even though they were kind of for women originally, and then it kind of that's a whole nother podcast. But there have always been strong women working in comics, and then they just make it out like
Well,
that's
remember
been the case.
that thing I did, again, we talked about before, where they asked women that were in comics. I was the only one that was actually in comics.
Yeah, if you didn't watch, we had a previous video. It wasn't about comics. It was actually about Star Wars. But a few years ago, Geeky Sparkles was invited to
answer some questions.
Yeah, it was like a round table for some magazine or website about women in comics.
With their viewpoint being women are kept out of comics.
Right. And their viewpoint was, basically, men are keeping us down.
My viewpoint was, one, comics were pretty much originally created to entertain women. Two, there are a lot of women in comics. There's a lot of women doing graphic novels, but they might not be in the main two comic publishers.
Right, maybe not Marvel DC.
Yeah, but there's a lot of them out there. A lot of the real powerful women, the ones that are the best-selling comics and all that, are women. And I said that, and I said, I think that there are some cases where you could argue that perhaps they don't let as many women in as they should, but there are all these examples over here of women, like, doing books, kicking butt, taking names, and they're doing great. I mean, J.K. Rowling isn't comics, but, that was like saying there's no powerful women in books. You know what I'm saying? It's just like... Yeah. And they wouldn't run my interview. They ran everybody else's.
No, and that... Okay, you want to talk about discrimination, that made me freaking furious, because they would run, as long as you... Were telling them what they wanted to hear. Never mind that she was only one. She was like one of 6 voices, and they were. She was the only one that had pro credit. She was the only one that had pro credit, because she worked on some Disney comics, too, and worked on our stuff, and been invited to conventions. She had
Wikipedia, but whatever.
But she had the credit, and these other women were basically wannabes. They were like Tumblr artists. They had no professional credit. But the story was women are being kept down. So tell us how you're being kept down. Not that it should have been like maybe you're just not that good, and that's why you're not. Maybe you just haven't gotten the right.
Well, I do think sometimes women are good and they're overlooked, but that's not because it's who you know, and they might not know somebody. I mean, I think that's a lot. I think that's more to do with it. The nepotism is more to do with it than gender. But I do know some women who read the comics, love the comics, and are very good and would make amazing comics, and they never get the opportunity because they're not, they're not knowing somebody.
They don't know the right people.
They aren't flirting with some guy who got them a job. Speaking of which, and Neon can verify this, back when I was dating him, we decided to go to the one comic convention near us. It was near me, close for me. And this is back in the day before all the cosplayers showed up, before all the girls were always in the outfits and things. And we went to the convention and stuff, and I got attention I didn't want, but that's another story entirely. But when you went to do your portfolio review with a guy who I'm not going to mention his name.
Yeah, he's actually a very well-known editor in comics.
And Neon can verify this. He was like hitting on me in line. Remember?
Yeah.
I
remember.
And you're trying to show him your portfolio, and he goes off on this long story about himself. And I'm just looking at him like, I don't care.
Yeah, I know.
I don't care. But I'm looking at him like, okay, I'm thinking, okay, I'll put up with it because I want him to look at your stuff. And he was going on about himself. And then when I looked around the other way because I thought he was talking to the people who were getting portfolio review, not me. I was just standing there. He stops the conversation. He's like, aren't you listening to my story?
No, not really. You're bored.
No, I was bored because I didn't care.
Yeah.
But I was like, he was hitting on me,
Yes,
and I actually put up with it. And the only reason I did, because knowing me now, I'd be like, oh heck no. But then I only put up with it because I was afraid it would hurt your chances if I didn't act like a cute little, booth babe and smile and twirl my hair and stuff. He spent more time looking at your stuff because I was with you twirling my hair.
Yeah, this is just to tell you how long that we've been in and around the comic book industry. Geeky Sparkles was one of 5 women at this convention.
Yeah, it was. And I was like one of
the only one that wasn't
there wasn't a booth babe. There's a couple girls that weren't. They were dressed like men. They were in they were trying very hard to look like they were dudes. And I remember thinking, that's okay if that's the real fashion sense and that's what they liked. But I remember thinking, are you just doing this because they won't take you seriously unless you dress like them? I didn't know. I thought it was odd.
I think it was just, I don't know. It wasn't, I will say that the comic book industry has become a lot more female friendly over the last 10, 15 years.
For readers and for women and the shows and stuff.
But then the thing is you can be more female friendly and not be so anti-man, which I think is kind of happening too.
That's another one of my
that's a whole
set me off buttons.
You know what I'm saying? It's like there's room for everybody to read and make comics.
Stop mansplaining me.
Okay, I'll shut up. I'll go in my corner.
Seriously, no. I think it's gotten so ridiculous that this is one of my pet peeves, as you'll verify. is this whole, mansplaining. And it's like, okay, yes, I do get it happens. It does happen legitimately sometimes. But just because a guy, if it's like, okay, say for example, you're in marketing and you're working with a guy who's been marketing for 20 years and you started 2 years ago, and they say to you, you know what, this might be a better way to go because of this, and this is what I've seen over the past, how many years, it works better. That is not mansplaining you.
Yeah.
And people just, everything, if a guy says anything, he's mansplaining.
Yeah.
He's belittling me. And it's not the same thing. If he's actually belittling you, he's an asshole.
Yeah. I've worked for some difficult women who were mansplaining to me. They were condescending. They're just condescending people. It doesn't matter.
Right. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're mansplaining you. But sorry, that's off topic, but it drives me crazy.
No, that's fine. But no, I mean, basically, what we're trying to bring this around here is that, is there a clique in comics? Yes. Has it hurt the comic book industry? Yes. The comic book industry is so utterly broken now that I think it's going to take people like Diversity in Comics, even if I don't agree with the tactics he uses, to basically shine a big flashlight on it and expose the fact that, part of the reason that the comic book industry isn't doing so hot right now is that you've gone too far the other way. You're alienating readers. You're insulting readers. I mean, they are the publishers.
I don't think it's just mainstream comics either. I think it's in publishing too.
It's definitely, well, okay. Now, I have a theory that because the New York publishing scene is really chumming up to the comic book scene because the graphic novels and the graphic novels becoming movies, that a lot of that sort of arrogance from the publishing scene has sort of rubbed off onto comics, and you're seeing a lot of the people who are.
They're using comics to try to get themselves a publishing deal.
Yeah, it's exactly
trying to
what
get themselves a movie deal.
Yeah, so what you're seeing is the New York publishing attitude, because a lot of the people that are the ones who are very much against diversity in comics and the YouTubers and whatever and the more vocal people, those are actually like agented cartoonists.
Yeah.
These are people. Now we could talk about this at length.
Let's give a brief synopsis.
But we do have some experience in that area. But these are agented cartoonists.
And the one agent particularly was the one who represents them, was the one who represented us.
This particular, we actually did have a New York agent at one point. We no longer have that agent. And this person does represent a lot of people in comics. And this person does represent a lot of the people who have been very vocal against guys like Diversity in Comics, and who I would call, I guess if you want to call them the SJW Comics Cabal or whatever they call it, they are absolutely part of the
who are associated with it,
the clique, the biggest clique. And so I do think that mainstream publishing, that sort of attitude is bled into comics. That's been a recent development because 10-15 years ago, no publisher would be caught dead for the most part publishing graphic novels, and Scholastic came along and things kind of took off from there. But so now comics has become a step stool for these people to get into.
But they're even more cliquey, I think, in the publishing houses than they are in the comic books. I mean, we know this for a fact. I mean, long and short of it was we had this person, and there's usually a time frame you do something, and we were stalled out, and we were stalled out, and we were stalled out for months. And during this time, we came in with some connections already.
Yes.
And that's one of the reasons that he was interested. And what this person did was take our name, our connections, get book deals for other clients of his.
Yes.
And then never present ours until the end, and then it was slapped together, and we got nowhere, and then they got rid of us.
Yeah, I mean...
That's what happened.
Yeah, you want to talk about the comics clique? I'll flat say, we were not the right kind of people.
I even got told I wasn't feminist enough.
We were not the right kind of people to get a publishing deal. I don't think it had anything to do with it. I think it was we personally, as a married couple...
Well, you can be a married couple as long as you're already in.
Yeah, as long as you're already in. But they weren't going to let a 30-plus year old married couple into comics, into the publishing circle, just because it's just...
Well, what got me was a couple things. One, the implication that you were too white, which is funny because
Did you just say that the implication I was too white? No, okay, fine. We weren't the right kind of people because we're over 30, we're straight, and we're white.
I got told it wasn't feminist. I got told it wasn't feminist enough. Neon got told basically it was that we were too white, but you
too old and too white.
You need more diversity in things. But meanwhile, your whole your stepdad and your whole step family are Hispanic.
Yes.
And some of them are like straight from Mexico Hispanic.
I grew up in a mixed household. I spent a lot of my youth in California. And yeah, I grew up in a mixed race household. So I think that was kind of funny. Like, I'm not
Because
white,
but people
whatever.
are, you know, how dare straight white people
No, people
judge
make
people?
assumptions. People make assumptions all the
Because
time.
I thought we were the ones supposed to be judging people.
Yeah.
And then I was told I wasn't feminist enough. And are you ready for this? The straight white male agent said that my character wasn't feminist enough because she was a teenage girl and she liked a boy. And that boy smiled at her and it made her happy.
Yeah.
Because it's not feminist enough, I think, one, that she liked a boy, and two, that her whole self-worth was wrapped up in the fact that he liked her. Well, a couple things here. One, the character was written that way intentionally because she's supposed to change and grow as the books continued. That was on purpose. Two, I was a teenage girl.
Really?
I have kids. I'm a teacher. I work with teenagers. And you know what? When you're a teenage girl, I don't care if you like a girl or if you like a boy, your whole self-worth is wrapped up in whether or not they like you. It is not a feminist or lack of feminism, anything. It is just reality. And working from experience as being a woman and being a teenage girl, not being a straight white dude telling a woman what she shouldn't be.
Yeah, but he's a straight white dude from New York, so he obviously knows more
about women, about teenage girls than
yes.
I do. Yeah, so
he knows more about being a woman.
We also got told from another agent that our book wasn't the right kind of book and it wouldn't sell. And then she went and pitched another book that was identical like ours, but somebody that was in the
Clique. Okay, guys, we're gonna stop right here. We're gonna break this video into two parts. It's running over an hour, so after this video, go and find part 2. We'll put a link to it in the description, and you can continue listening. And would love to hear your comments, your feedback.